Well, Tokyo's Nikkei stock market is opening for Monday trading as investors look for a barometer of what's to come in world financial markets this week. It, of course, follows that huge sell-off last week triggered by fears over the coronavirus. Well, Tokyo's stock market was rattled, of course, by those health fears and the effect on the wider economy. Right now, you can see it's down just a little over 1% there in the first hour of trading. Well, journalist Kaori and Joji is in Tokyo following the latest developments. Certainly double-digit losses right around the markets across the world last week. So how are investors feeling right now as the markets open there?
Still jittery. I think the fact that we're seeing new cases of coronavirus erupt in all parts of the globe. The sell-off continues for the equity market here in Tokyo. Trading has been up and running for about 15 minutes this week. The market is down more than 1.2%, 20,889. It's not as an acute a sell-off as we saw on some days last week, but still, you have to remember the market has already trading at nearly 6-month lows as $5 trillion worth of market capitalization were wiped out last week around the world. We are seeing weakness on the Topix index as well. That index is down 1%. I think the key now will be how the Chinese markets fare when they begin trading in about an hour's time. I think the thing that spooked the markets this weekend is the factory numbers that came out from China in February, dropping to a record low. So I think the reality is sinking in that this paralysis, not only in Wuhan, but because of the supply chain damage throughout China, factory activity has basically has halted, and it's at a standstill. And it's this paralysis, I think, is what's unnerving investors the most. The U.S. Federal Reserve and other central bankers are saying that they're prepared to do more, but investors are already saying that what can they do in a situation that is really not a financial crisis? You're talking about a crisis at the daily life level. So people are worried about whether or not they can go out to shop. People are hoarding, and they're worried that whether an interest rate cut can really can counter any kind of further damage to the psyche. And an interest rate cut doesn't really help to get factories starting to hum again in China. And I think the supply chain story is going to be with us for quite some time because China has really moved up the supply chain. If their factories are not up and running, it means people can't get parts all over the world. And they've really moved up this food chain, and that is what's unnerving investors the most. No asset class has been spared. In the sell-off, we're seeing a continuing decline in oil, record low yields on U.S. Treasury, so another fairly jittery start to the trading week here in Asia. Back to you.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. Kaori and Joji, thanks for keeping an eye on the markets for us in Tokyo. Well, I want to go to Hong Kong now because its economy is also suffering. The government is trying to take steps to ease the pain. The measures include handing out more than $15 billion in payouts and stimulus. That includes over $1,200 for all adults who are permanent residents, so about $9 billion to individuals. Companies can also look forward to some financial assistance and tax breaks. With me now to discuss this is Edward Yao, Hong Kong's Secretary of Commerce and Economic Development. Good to have you with us.
Hi.
So we've seen that schools across Hong Kong have largely been closed since late January, and they plan to remain closed until late April. How are families coping with that? And for parents who are forced to stay home right now and homeschool their children, are they still being paid in full by their companies, as far as you know?
Well, of course, this is a very tough time that we are handling this epidemic, and we are undergoing a recession that is the worst in the last decade. But I think the society is still soldiering on. It's a difficult time, school being closed. Some companies are working in sort of parallel shift, and the government also sort of asked some of our staff to work from home. But by and large, I think we hope to sort of tackle the epidemic on the one hand, and also sort of provide the energy for the entire sort of society and economy to go on as usual, as much as we could. So the relief package was there to help those hard hit, but at the same time, sort of getting ourselves prepared that, well, when the day come back, that we can sort of relaunch, and we still should be in full steam for that.
So, Mr. Yao, in an attempt to resuscitate the economy, we have seen that stimulus package that I mentioned, that you also mentioned, 10,000 Hong Kong dollars to every family, which is a bit over 1,200 US dollars.
Yeah.
Two questions. How long could that last a typical family in Hong Kong? And what do you say to some sectors there that have criticised this, saying they've got no aid at all?
Well, that cash handout is not the only sort of economic relief. That, in fact, is the biggest cash handout by the government in any budget before. But on top of that, besides family, sort of all adult getting that 1,200 US dollar, company and also individual are also getting the tax exemption for almost a year, exempting their rates and rent. And also some companies are being given sort of a economic relief, for instance, waiving their water, electricity, and sewage charges for those hard-hit industry like hotel, like tourism industry. We are also targeting those, in particular, retail and also food and beverages sector, which are hard hit. But at the same time, I think what we need in the economy is also the vitality to sort of go on. That's why we have also rolled out a 100% government guaranteed loan scheme, allowing companies to get the needy money for this very, very tough sort of a time.
We know last year that the economy contracted in Hong Kong in 2019. It was the first annual recession in a decade.
Yeah.
How concerned are you about the outlook going forward, given the ramifications we're already seeing of the coronavirus?
I think Hong Kong is hard hit, certainly, no doubt about it. I believe, well, at this moment, the entire community's focus is to contain the disease, doing our part as an international city. And certainly, well, we have to be guided by scientists, medical professionals, as well as taking the entire community with us. But I think we should be also sort of working together with the international community, that because, well, this epidemic respects no boundary, and therefore we are also watching how other cities, how other countries are also coping. And certainly, I think this is the time for us to share experience. Well, Hong Kong is undergoing a tough time, but I think we should be able to manage it because we have been there before. We have overcome the SARS, and I believe this is the time for the community to act together. And based on science, people's worry are understandable, but let's not go to the panic mode. I think the same also applies to the international community. There's nothing we can boast about our ability. We have to be focused on prompt, effective, and measured sort of measures to tackle the epidemic.
So obviously the epicenter of this global outbreak is in mainland China. There are major concerns over Hong Kong refusing to close the border with mainland China. Obviously, we've seen other clusters and outbreaks around the world, and countries have moved pretty quickly to close borders. Surely, if you want to curb the epidemic, stopping cross-border travel makes sense.
Well, actually, despite the slogan saying closing the border, actually Hong Kong takes a very prompt, effective, but also measured sort of a series of policies. I think we are among the first sort of putting a stop for people coming from Wuhan, which is one of the epicenter earlier. But at the same time, I think we need to maintain the border where, for instance, majority of people crossing the border between Hong Kong and the mainland are in fact Hong Kong people who have the right to vote coming back to Hong Kong. So as a result, I think we take steps to require, for instance, Hong Kong people and also any visitors coming back from the mainland to require 14 days quarantine. At the moment, we are in fact sort of imposing this control over almost 20,000 people, either at home or in holiday camps. Well, these are important and effective steps to curb the sort of the spreading of the disease. But at the same time, we are also sort of imposing certain control on people sort of coming through the city because, well, we are an international sort of travel center. At the moment, tourists has come down tremendously. But we need to handle people still crossing the border without suffocating the day-to-day sort of ongoing business within the city.
Edward Yao, Hong Kong's Secretary of Commerce and Economic Development. Good to get your perspective. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.